Usually people applaud when I stop talking, not when I start talking. So, good morning and welcome. While we've still got a little bit of learning left to do together, it's my job to sort of initiate our momentum in the direction of home this morning. To do that, I just want to sort of reconnect us with what we tried to place right at the center of our conversation and learning at the New Tech Annual Conference this week, and that's this slide that you see on the screen right now, this idea of personalized learning, and in particular, the conference theme about making it personal. We talked about our goal being really to activate the network, to sort of launch a year of learning, and there's one really concrete way we want to highlight that we're going to try to do that this year. And that is through this. We're going to be running this design fellowship competition to support a small group of teachers in designing personalized projects. And so on August 1st, we'll launch an application and select 5 winners and give them $1,000 to support the process of designing and enacting a personalized project design over the course of the fall semester. And then it's our hope that we'll do a lot of learning along with you, and that we'll have the beautiful products that you make and the beautiful project designs that you make to share with the entire network when we're back in this room together next year. As we think about the year ahead, I want to spend just a moment talking about kind of who we hope to be as an organization, or more specifically, how we hope to be. We hope that one of the things, or one of the ways that you think about us, if you think about sort of the character of our organization, is that you think about us as being generously disruptive. It's our full intent to keep inviting you into difficult conversations. But it's also our commitment and our hope to do that generously every time we do it. So in the spirit of disruption, our challenge to you is to make it personal. To spend the coming year thinking and designing and acting at the level of each student. And in the spirit of generosity, our commitment to you is to support you through that process. To care equally about supporting you through the process of change as we are about the change itself. We believe, understood, or taken seriously, we believe that the conversation about personalization will be disruptive for us. And we think that's a great thing. So, with that said, I want to call out a few of my colleagues to keep us moving forward. And I want to introduce Nick Kapplehof, who's a Director of District and School Development, who's going to share his thinking about the week and his thoughts heading into the year.
Thanks, Jim. Good morning. I was asked to share some reflections of the week with you as we close our session today. And I'm actually going to go ahead and share some reflections of my month before I start to share some reflections of my week. Prior to this 4th of July, I never had the opportunity to be pulled behind a boat in an inner tube before. And if you have had this opportunity, you know it's pretty exhilarating. So during my experience, the boat slowed down. I thought it was supposed to go fast. It started going in circles and started trapping my tube in this kind of whirlpool. And then before long, the boat straightened out, accelerated, and created this slingshot effect that completely threw the tube to the side of the boat and then me 10 more feet into the air and then into the water. It may or may not have been a coincidence that my father-in-law was driving the boat. But it's got me starting to think that NTAC is a very similar experience for me. We know that progress to our goals is not linear. And I often find myself in cycles of thought that are sometimes tough to get out of. But when I come here, I find something to grab onto, and it slingshots me to further progress towards my goals. And my goals aren't terribly different from your goals. We talk a lot about our why at New Tech Network, and my why is simple. It's to create scholars that will have the potential to change the world. But what's been motivating me this week is how do we actually know that we're changing the world? My dear graduate advisor, Dr. Robert Monson, loved the maxim, what gets measured is what gets done. And so what's been motivating me this week is to find measurements of how we're changing the world. How are we finding measurements of deeper learning in our communities and in our schools? And I've met some people and met some schools this week that really continue to propel my slingshot effect through this week. I heard a principal talk about how 80% of his students are completing year one of college before they even graduate high school. I've met new schools and districts coming here because they want to find new measures in addition to end-of-course exams and standardized tests that can help influence a community conversation about what they value within teaching and learning. And I've met veteran schools who are striving through their CRA work to show proficiency rates within the domains of knowledge and thinking. And some of these measures are out there and easy to find and really exciting, and some of them are not. And it's the ones that are not that are propelling me along my trajectory to continue to seek more ways to measure how we are changing the world. And we know that a carefully crafted slingshot can actually change the world. And so I'm asking you to find yours this week. What is your slingshot that's going to get you out of a cycle of thought and really find some evidence to show your students and scholars that you're changing the world? So find it, and take it, and throw it. I want to introduce my colleague, Starla Collins-Ross, who's going to share some of her reflections with you this week. Thank you.
Good morning. Some of my family snuck in for free breakfast, so don't mind them. I love them anyway. Good morning, and thank you all so much for being here. I must admit I entered INTAC with a very heavy heart, definitely because of personal reasons, but definitely around the tragedies we've been experiencing around the world. But there's something about coming to INTAC that reinvigorates me and gives me purpose again. And so as I had the opportunity to work with new schools in my existing schools, there are a couple of words that continue to come up for them and for me. And the first one is voice. Whose voice matters? I've had so many experiences where I've had new teachers grapple with how are we going to intentionally embed the voices of our students into the curriculum and into the standards that we are developing each day. I've had the opportunity to work with schools to think about how we can create space and opportunity for all voices to feel valued, important, and connected to the work of the schools that we're creating. And so from that point, we started to think about what structures are important to ensure that all voices are heard and valued. But then the next thing that came up for my schools and for the teachers that I've worked with this week is community. What does it mean for us as a school to establish a community? What does it look like for us to ensure that our community is reflected in what we do every day with our children and what we do every day in our schools? And how do we create authentic lessons that's connected to the communities that our children see every day? I had one new teacher, and I'm so excited for him because this is his first year teaching. He's already thinking about how he can compare the 1960s civil rights movement to the civil rights movements that we're seeing on today. So what are we doing to create those authentic connections in our classrooms and in our schools for our communities? And so the last thing that came up, and that continues to come up with my existing schools and with all of your voices in the room, is equity. How and what are we doing to ensure that all students have the same access and opportunities, regardless to where they live or regardless to the zip code that they reside in? What does that mean? What does that look like? And how are we developing our curriculum to do that? And so what I appreciate this week, I entered with a heavy heart, but I'm leaving inspired. I'm leaving inspired with your voices. I'm leaving inspired because of your communities, and I'm leaving inspired because all of us in here are centered in the same purpose, because what we want is equal access and opportunities for all students, and we believe that PBL will get that for them. Thank you so much, And I hope that you are willing to take that journey with me.
So I have the privilege this morning of introducing our closing keynote speaker. Lydia mentioned on Tuesday morning that this year, the first New Tech High School, Napa New Tech, celebrates its 20th anniversary. And in the ensuing 20 years, or over the ensuing 20 years, the pace of change in our work has been incredibly fast and incessant. There's a very small number of people who've been present for all of that change, and your speaker this morning is one of them. Paul Curtis is one of the founding staff members at Napa New Tech High School, and he's been instrumental in the work of New Tech Network ever since. To this day, he continues to shape the work of our network as our Director of Platform Development, and he's played a huge part in shaping the development of our new Echo tools. So please welcome to the stage Paul Curtis.
Wow, if you are not tired, exhausted at the end of NTAC, you haven't done it right. It is mentally exhausting, it's physically exhausting. So many fantastic conversations even down by the pool at 3 o'clock in the morning. I want to kind of touch upon
Pokemon, got him! Pikachu, boom! Gotta catch them all!
Wow, that fad really caught on fast. So I wanted to kind of carry through as a bookend to the week some of the ideas that Tom Vander Ark shared in the opening sessions about the challenges that we have and that our students are going to face in their lifetimes and that we're all living through. Especially this slide. This one kind of scared me. It showed the artificial intelligence catching up to human capacity sometime in the 2030s, and that seemed really close to me, and it actually made me panic a little bit. You know, the whole Terminator movie, I was in the 80s, and I still have visions of Arnold Schwarzenegger kicking in my door, primarily because I was going to save the world or something. But it led me to a new driving question in this moment of panic, which was, what will these robots need in a pet? Because, you know, these things are going to be smarter, faster than us. And then, you know, at first I was scared, and I was like, you know, my cat's got a pretty good life. You know, he gets fed, he really doesn't sleeps all day. And so how do we think about, you know, morphing ourselves into something that is cute and cuddly for the robots so that we can continue existing in this world? So I took a few deep breaths and backed away from that panic and said, all right, Paul, get back to work. You can't evolve yourself into a pet in the next 30 years. So back to education. We've put up this slide in several sessions throughout NTAC this year, and I think it's worth diving into just a little bit about the two kind of big fronts and challenges to the traditional educational system. And the first is the deeper learning stuff, and this is the stuff we're kind of used to. This is our camp. It is the people who believe in PBL, who want to see kids doing real work, experimentation, doing things out in the real world, critical thinking. We want to see the 4 C's or 21st century skills, or whatever you call them. This is kind of our meat and potatoes and has been for the last 20 years. And then there's the other big initiatives that are out there, which is the personalized learning camp. These are the folks that are really passionate about leveraging technology and providing much more individual instruction to students so that we can kind of move away from that assembly line where every kid is getting a lesson that connects to their world and what they know and what they need to know. And the sad part is that when we attend kind of conferences, these are two different camps that don't have a lot of overlap. That the deeper learning people kind of walk into the blended learning environment and see kids with headphones on and, you know, working on computers and not collaborating and not developing higher order thinking skills, and we kind of criticize that. And on the other side, the personalized community looks in our classrooms and sees kids that you and I both know are there, that are kind of riding the coattails of their colleagues and are not really mastering the content, that even though we've got maybe an engaging project, that everyone is doing exactly the same thing, that all the kids are doing the same workshop and all the kids are doing the same research and all the kids produce the same final product. So we've got some room to grow there into customizing our curriculum. And so our true great hope is to launch this idea about how do we take what we really know is great in PBL about the engagement and the higher order thinking skills and preparations for life and the development of all those soft skills that we think are important. And at the same time, think about grabbing some of those best practices out of personalized learning to allow us to get better, to make sure that kids aren't slipping through the cracks, that when we say no child left behind, it's not a slogan, it is a true idea that says that a kid is not going to graduate from my class not knowing what he should know. And this is a challenge for us. It's not something we are going to stand up here as New Tech Network and say, hey, we got it figured out. Here's what it is. So what does it mean to personalize PBL? Unfortunately, we aren't sure yet. We got some ideas, some tips, but we don't know. This is very similar to what it was like when I was at New Tech High back in the 1990s. In that there wasn't a strict kind of process for what PBL looked like and how you do assessment in PBL and how we assess 21st century skills. And so it was an evolving thing, and people who came through then, we didn't have training protocols, we didn't have rubrics set up, we didn't have any of that stuff. And we figured it out over time, and every year we got a little bit better, and every year our training got a little bit better, but it wasn't there when we first started. And in the same way, we aren't there yet either as a New Tech Network here or as a New Tech Network in the large sense of all of you working in the schools. But we do know how we have some ideas about this. First, I want to make a distinction between individualization and personalization. So the word personalization, of course, is being used everywhere. It's kind of like gluten-free. They just throw it on anything, including textbooks. Say, yeah, it's a gluten-free textbook. It's great for your kids. And personalization is the same thing. There's 1,000 different definitions of it. So New Tech Network is slowly refining a definition that makes sense for us. So a lot of people call what they call personalization, we would call individualization, which means that you've got a playlist of curriculum. All these activities, all in a nice set of order, and the idea is that kids can navigate through it at their own pace. So one of the key characteristics is control over pace of your curriculum. So kids who are advanced can move along much faster, and kids who are struggling can take their time, and you can remediate and support them as they go. The second big characteristic is that this idea of competency-based education or mastery-based education, where kids aren't allowed to just keep moving on when they haven't mastered the content. And right now, it's kind of that assembly line, right? It just keeps moving whether the kid has mastered what they need to master. They just go from first grade to second grade to third grade. And even in our classrooms where we have amazing projects, if Billy and Tommy didn't get what they were supposed to get at that project, we still move on to the next project. So this idea about kind of holding kids up a little bit until they've mastered before just moving on is part of that concept of individualization. So personalization has both of those characteristics as well, we believe. Those are key components. But it adds a couple more. One, as Starla talked about just a few minutes ago, this concept of voice and choice. That I think still in our projects, we've got every kid producing the same kind of product, or every kid doing the same activities within the project. And how do we build in more voice and choice where the students' passions kind of start to show up and are part of the project, where they get to kind of help design some of their activities and what they would like to do, choosing between several different ways that they could learn. Maybe it's through a workshop, maybe it's through videos online, maybe it's peer-to-peer tutoring, but that we loosen up the structure of our practice to allow kids to kind of choose their own path through learning. And that requires us to be much better at tracking, because it's easy to track when everyone is on exactly the same path, and it's much harder to track when kids are all kind of finding their own way to the knowledge. And so we need to get better about data collection, understanding where every kid is, and having dashboards that show that. So that brings us to Echo. One of the key things we set out when we looked for a new learning management system was that it could support personalized learning. And so there are features in here that are buried inside that are very supportive of the kind of practices we want to see. We don't expect you to be using them all next week when school starts. Obviously, it's going to take us a while to figure out how to use this as a best practice, but they're there. So let me go through a few of those. On the individualization side, you've got the capacity now in Echo to tie individual activities to standards. Literally, you can drag your standards from one column over onto your syllabus and say that this activity is tied to this standard, and if they've mastered this activity, the computer's going to know that they've mastered that standard. So now we start to get dashboards and data around student performance against the standards, rather than just whether they've completed a task or not completed the task. We would also kind of push you to think about developing your power standards. Some of our states have so many standards it gets ridiculous. So how do we condense that? But this idea of us clearly spelling out what our objectives are and measuring students against that gets us down the road to that competency-based learning that is important in personalized learning strategies. You've also got the capability to create gatekeeper activities. In other words, if kids haven't completed a certain task, or even gotten a passing score in that class, they can't go on. They don't see the other items in the project. It is kind of a holding pattern that says, you know what, you can't go on until you've mastered this kind of phase. That helps keep those kids from just getting shoved along. Now, this is a really important accountability measure for our students, but it's also a really important accountability measure for ourselves. Because if we set these kind of gatekeeper activities, that means you as a teacher are 100% responsible for helping the kid get through that thing. Whatever that gatekeeper activity was, you just can't say, oh, well, too bad, we're going to move on. You got to keep those kids catching up. So that prevents those kids from sliding under the bars that we set, but rather forces both the student and us to make sure every kid gets over that bar. And if you want to raise that stake a little bit more, you can start using what we're calling capstone tasks, which are tasks that you can build into your course that if the kid does not complete, they don't pass the class. In other words, are there some tasks in your classroom that are so important? Maybe it's a CRA, maybe it's an important reflection on their learning, maybe it's the actual presentation of that product for their project. But are there some tasks so important that if you don't get to see their demonstration of learning on that task, they don't even pass the class. They have to do it. Right? Again, accountability for the student and accountability for us to make sure that every kid is crossing the bars that we set. On the personalization side, there's some really neat features. In the old Echo, we could create groups, and they're mostly around projects is how we used grouping. In this, you can create lots of different groups around anything. You can pick these 6 kids, put them in a group and say, you know what, they need some special activities. And so I'm going to assign only those 6 kids some remediation activities. The other kids don't even see it in the syllabus, but these kids see it in their to-do list as something they got to get done. Tied to that is you can actually control the visibility of things. If you have different reading levels in your classroom, you can use the advanced visibility features inside of Echo to say, you know what, these kids see this entry document, this group of kids sees this entry document, and this other group of kids sees a totally different entry document. You can start to customize what kids see inside of Echo depending on what group they're in. I think a really cool feature that I have no idea how you all are going to use it is this: kids can start to assign themselves things. They can look at their standards list and go, wow, I don't have these 3 things checked, but man, I'm going to go out to Khan Academy or Guru or someplace else and assign myself work that will demonstrate that I'm learning or have learned something. Right? We're putting some of that power back in the hands of students. So again, I'm not sure how you will use all this. We don't know. It's going to be a great period of exploration and experimentation as we figure out how to use all these neat features that are hidden on the backside of Echo. I do also want to throw out a warning that these features can empower us to be incredibly powerful PBL teachers, but they can also empower us to be really horrible teachers. If you've ever gotten a speeding ticket and had to go and take one of those online courses to erase the speeding ticket, I don't know if you have that in your state. In California, you can kind of pretend like you never got a speeding ticket if you take a course. But it was basically read, multiple choice test. And by the way, we have quizzing in the new Echo. Read, multiple choice test. Read, multiple choice test. You could imagine a teacher using this new version of Echo to create a giant playlist of activities and worksheets, basically, that kids had to do, and then just sit back and let the computer do all the grading and lose all of the power that we're trying to get to with personalized PBL. And so we can use these powers for good, or we can slip to the dark side and lose all of the power of PBL by going to a simple playlist and distill our content down to a bunch of tasks. So I encourage you to remember our kind of spectrum here of what we want projects to look like, with lots of rigorous activities, with kids making choices, with multiple pathways and multiple ways to learn, and lots of different products. All the diversity we want to see in our classroom, we want to see that diversity reflected inside of our projects. Because New Tech Network doesn't have enough acronyms and key slogans, I'm going to introduce a new one, but we're only going to use it for this session, and you don't ever have to use it again. So PLS, this is what I'd like you to do for the next year. First, play. The new Echo is like a box of Legos. There are a whole bunch of different pieces, a whole bunch of different colors, a whole bunch of different shapes. Put them together in all sorts of interesting ways and figure out what works. And if it doesn't work, you can always just take that little assignment and just delete it. Kids like when you do that. All right? Feel free to play. I want you to not feel fear that, oh, if I try this, my kids might get confused or they get lost or parents are going to. Free yourself up from that and let the kids know we are experimenting about what helps you learn best. So we're going to try this kind of activity and see what happens. Right? Open up your classroom to say, I'm learning how to be a better teacher while you are learning my content. Next, learn. Right? It's not enough just to experiment, but try to document for yourself what is working, what is not working. Do little kind of mini cycles of experimentation where let me try this and see what happens. Are kids learning more or learning less? Did they do that assignment? Did they not? Am I losing passion? Am I losing excitement? Or am I gaining excitement and passion for my content? Right? Capture those ideas. And then try them on the next project. And then try them on the next project. Tweak them, play with them. Because after we figure out what works, our last letter is share, right? We need you to share with each other and us what works well. And I think this is tied exactly to what Jim said a few minutes ago about our design challenge. Is offering up some sort of rewards for some really exemplary stuff that we can show off next year. But I really hope that all of you in the next year share within your school and then come back here and share more broadly about how we're using these tools. This worked for me, this didn't work for me, this got me great results, this didn't. We need this collective experimentation to take our work to the next level, to bring these personalized learning in. There's no way that a bunch of new tech coaches can sit back in our office and just kind of think this stuff up. This has to be tried out in real live classrooms. So share your ideas with your colleagues, and when you come back next year, share with us, right? We've got about 365 days, give or take, right? We got about a year to come back. Not that we're all going to be experts next year, but we've got an opportunity to have each of you come back and run a session that says, here's how I'm personalizing my PBL. Have an awesome last few hours, have a very safe travel home, and thank you for making the commitment to come this year.